So we're going to continue on the display and positioning section. We went through the lesson last time in the last stream, or you can also check it out on my YouTube channel called Lemon Juice Stand if you missed out on it. And today, in this stream, we're gonna go over the quiz, and most likely it won't take that long, so we'll go through the project right afterwards. Okay, so which of the following values will position an element in relation to the nearest non-static element? The nearest non-static element. Nearest non-static element. The nearest non-static. So if it's static, and then the most nearest non-static would be relative. It's not, it's absolute. This value allows you to position an element relative to its default static position on the web page. Allows you to position an element relative to its default static position on the web page. So the nearest non-static element is absolute. This value allows you to position an element relative. It's relative, okay, to the default static position on the web page. Okay, so the next nearest non-static element is absolute because it's default to the static position on the web page. Alright. Complete the statement. An inline element starts a new line and can be sized using the height and width property. Oh no, I don't remember. I was making a tweet about this. An inline element does not start a new line and cannot be sized using the height and width properties. So does it use the height and width block? I can't remember which one was which. In my tweet, I said that in block was a mix with them both. And the one that respects the height and the width is what would it be? It would be I couldn't tell which one was which though. It starts a new line but cannot be sized using the height and width. Does not start a new line and can be sized using the height and width property. Does not start a new line and cannot be sized using the height and width property. So an inline element starts a new line. Does it start a new line? Yeah, I think it starts a new line. And it does not use you cannot size the height and width property, so this one. Oh, it does not start a new line, but I was right about it not being able to size the height and width. So an inline does not start a new line and cannot be used using the height and width properties. The z-index will be ignored if an element is set to which of the following position values? It cannot work if it is Oh no, I don't remember. I know it has something. It doesn't work with one of them. But, oh, I can't remember. I'm going to guess that it will be ignored if an element is set to static. I guessed right? Correct. Default static positioned elements will ignore z-index. Default static position elements will ignore z-index. Okay. Complete the statement. An inline block element. Since an inline does not start a new line. Oh wait, a block will allow it to start a new line and can be sized using height and width. Oh, it still does not start a new line? Oh, none of inline and block does not start a new line. But so an inline cannot be sized by the height and width, but the block can be sized by the height and width. But they both do not start a new line. Right. How will this rule set affect the .title card element? How will this rule set affect the .title card element? Okay, so it's having a position with a fixed value, and they want you to move it away from the top by 0 pixels, so there will not be much change. It has to be fixed. What does fixed mean? Meaning it stays in place. Oh, so fixed will fix the position on the page regardless of parent element. So the correct answer is that the fixed position will remove this element from the flow of the document and keep it in the same position with the browser, even if the user scrolls. Okay, so this is kind of like the sticky value. This is hard. The display and positioning is the hardest for me. What does the z-index control? The depth. Yay, that's one thing, the relative depth of the overlapping elements. How will this rule set affect the .card element? Relative position. Position the .card element 10 pixels from the top of a positioned ancestor element. Position the card element 10 pixels lower than its default position. Fix the card element 10 pixels from the top of the page. I don't think it's fixed, so I'll say position the card 10 pixels from the top. Wrong again, and the correct answer is position the card element 10 pixels lower than its default position. Oh, so it has to be lower than its default position. Oh, is that it? Relative will allow offsets like top to start from the element's default position, not the position of its parent element. Relative will allow offsets like top to start from the element's default position, not the position of its parent element. Relative will allow offsets like top to start from the element's default position. Alright. Which of the following CSS properties can be used to set an element's behavior to inline, inline block, or block? Set an element's behavior to. These are all a type of display. Yay, that's one thing I know. Alright. It controls the block level of an element. Which of the following position values will remove an element from the flow of the HTML document? Which of the following positioning values will remove an element from the flow of the HTML document? I know. Fixed will. I'm correct. Fixed elements will be fixed to a specific location on the screen. Which of the following is a default position value? Which of the following is a default position value? Which of the following is a default position value? Well, the default is static. You got it. Complete the statement, a block element. A block element starts a new line. None of the block or inline starts a new line, so does not start a new line. And the block element is the one that can be sized using the height and width. Oh my god, block starts a new line? Block starts a new line? Block elements create a new block that takes up the full width of their parent element. Block creates a new block that takes up the full width of their parent element. Alright. Oh, that was a bad quiz. Let's do that again. I got 5 correct. Felt like it was just 3. Okay, but let's retake this and see what I learned. Which of the following values will position an element in relation to the nearest non-static element? The nearest non-static element would not be static. It can't be static itself, so it's either fixed or absolute. Absolute. Complete the statement an inline element. An inline element does not start a new line, and it cannot be sized using the height and width. Same line, it flows on the same line, but cannot be set with height and width. The z-index will be ignored if an element is set to which of the following position values? I got this correct last time, but I don't remember what it was. It was fixed, or was it relative? Z-index will affect overlapping elements with position relative. Will affect overlapping elements with position relative. But if it's static, if it's standing still, there's no such thing as death, but it's moving, then there is such thing as death. I mean, not moving, relative. The inline block element inline block element. Since it's a mix of both inline and block, inline, so I don't think it would start a new line, and can be sized. It can be sized. Okay, so it inherited the ability to flow on the same line, and their dimensions can be set with height and width from the block. It inherited this feature from the block and this feature from the inline. Nice. How will this rule set affect the .title card element? .title card will be displayed in its default position. Fixed. It will position the .title card 0 pixels from the top. It will remove the title card from the flow. Okay, so the fixed value will remove the element from the flow of the document and keep it in the same position within the browser window. The Z index enclosed, we know that it controls the depth of the overlapping elements. How will this rule set affect the dot card element? The relative position will position the dot card element 10 pixels lower than its default position. The combination of relative value and what was this thing called again? The top will result in this behavior. Which of the following CSS properties can be used to set an element's behavior to inline? Oh, this one is the property name is display that controls the block level of an element. Which of the following position values will remove an element from the flow of the HTML document? I know the fixed one will. It will be fixed to a specific location on the screen. Which of the following is the default position value? The default is static. And then the block element, this one is the one that starts a new line. And it can be sized. That's a whole lot of improvements, still something to work on, but I can redo that on your own, or you can replay the video on my channel. But next, we gotta move on. Start our next recommended reading on chapter 15. Now, I'm not going to read through this. You can go buy this book and check it out yourself. And so, we only spent 20 minutes, so let's go through this project in this stream. A Broadway project. In this project, you will use the properties such as display and position to improve the layout of the displaying page for a fictional design firm. The site has some style rules to begin with. You will improve the layout and positioning of the navigation menu at the top of the page and the 3 supporting sections. Design, develop, deploy. What? You will improve the layout and positioning of the navigation menu at the top of the page and the 3 supporting sections. Design, develop. Okay, cool. So we will watch this video, the solution video, afterwards. Once we give it a shot. So the first step is the header currently scrolls with the rest of the document. Okay, so let's see which one is the header. Where is the header? The header, it would be, that's the header. This is the whole header, and it currently scrolls with the rest of the document. It does. Set its position property so that it stays stuck to the top of the window when the document is scrolled. Right, if we do fixed, so that the element is fixed to its position regardless of the scrolling. So let me see what the difference is between fixed and sticky. Oh, so this is what happens when we set it to fixed, and when we set it to sticky, what will it look like? It doesn't work? Why is it not sticking? Anyways, let's put it back to fix. The header has shrunk. Change the width of the same element so that it stretches across its entire parent element. So we could do that with by setting the width to 100%. And so when we scroll, it's fixed. List items LI inside of the navigation section nav are currently displayed as a list. Set their display property so that they can appear next to each other horizontally, but so that you still set their width in the next text. Inside of the navigation section, set their display properties so that they can appear next to each other. So that would mean we can set it with inline. Let's see what inline does. It does keep it all in one line, okay, but what does the inline block do? Wait, let's also try the block. It does nothing. Wait. Yeah, it does nothing. Oh yeah, it keeps each of the elements on their own line because the block does start a new line. Uh-oh, am I frozen? Okay, now, so let's see what the inline block does. I know it's going to be on the same horizontal space. Wait, what happened? Just like that. So there's no difference between the result of inline block and inline. Alright, so set the width of the same elements to 80 pixels. The width of the same element. We were working on this one, so when we change the width to 80 pixels, since we're using inline block, it would respect the height and width that we set it to. But let's see what happens if we don't use inline. Does it listen to the width? It doesn't. They were right when it says it doesn't respect the height and width. Okay, so the block also does, but we wouldn't be able to see the difference because they would all start on each of their line. Okay, so let's put this back as inline block, and because we want to be able to set the width, and inline block will help us do that. And the next step is, after changing the position of the header element to fixed, the contents of the entire site after it shifted upwards. Set the position of the main so that we can position it relatively. Set the position of main so that it can be positioned relatively, which will position it relative to its default position. To its default position. But the header has disappeared behind the main. We use z-index to make the header visible. The z-index greater than 0 should allow the header to appear in front of the main. For example. So we can bring the header back on top by setting it to a positive number. And it's back on the top. Now the navigation bar looks good, but it is blocking the title at the top of the page. It's blocking the title at the top of the page, so offset the main by 80 pixels from the top. And they chose 80 pixels. Why? Yes, why? I don't know why, but I'm guessing this is about 80 pixels. So they're offsetting main by 80 pixels from the top. Oh yeah, and we can do that because they're using the relative value for position. So that moves it gives us just enough space to see the title. Now fix up the supporting element style below the image. After a declaration to the supporting dot call, let's look for that. Rule says so that these elements can appear horizontally next to each other, but have defined height and width. Add a declaration to the dot supporting call rule set so that these elements can appear horizontally next to each other, but have defined height and width. So it sounds like we're going to use the combination of both inline and block because they want us to have it share the horizontal space and to also define the height and width. Yep, it says right here it will allow this element to flow horizontally on the same line and allow you to set their dimensions. So here we just add display inline block. Wait a minute, what is dot supporting dot call? That's the one with the image here. So let's see what change it does. Why do I have to keep refreshing? Is something not loading? So what change did it have? Let me do this again. That's weird. It didn't move it. I wonder if I did it wrong. Anyways, we'll look at the solutions later. Next step is inspect the .supporting.call elements. They don't seem to be floating horizontally yet because they have no set width. Set the width and height of .supporting.call elements to 200 pixels. We want to set both the height and width to 200 pixels for the .supporting.call. $200 for both of them, and I'll see the difference. It looks way better. Now, inspect the dots supporting call elements. They don't seem to be flowing horizontally yet because they have no set width. Set the width. We did that. The final step is great work. The Broadway design site looks much better. If you want to continue coding, challenge yourself to make the footer element also fixed to the bottom of the page regardless of scrolling. To the bottom of the page regardless of scrolling. So what would we do there? We can just add fixed position to the footer. Let's see if that does it. It made it disappear. I don't think that was it. Weird. Okay, so let's see if they will show us. We'll get unstuck.
Hey guys.
This is OutSystems, the most complete full-stack application development platform for professional developers. Quickly create mobile and web applications, chatbots, and reactive web apps for any device. Build your data models, workflows, logic, and pixel-perfect user interfaces and interactions, and even add your custom code, all inside the most advanced IDE. Integrate any system and source of data and publish with a...
Hey guys, I'm Matt, a developer from Ohio, and in this video, I'll be walking you through the Broadway project. To complete this project, you'll need to be familiar with the position property and the display property. Let's get started. In this project, we'll use CSS positioning properties to improve the layout of an existing web page. We'll use position to change how the page organizes elements, display to change how elements organize themselves, and a handful of other properties to fine-tune those changes. We'll start with the header. The unordered list in the header is meant to be a navigation bar, but it needs some work to look like one. One common feature of nav bars is that they often stay at the top of the window, even when you scroll down. Ours does not do that. We can make the header stay on top of the window by changing its position to fixed. Fixed elements are positioned relative to the window instead of the document, so scrolling has no effect on them. So under the header selector, we're going to add position and set it to fixed. The header stays at the top of the page when we scroll, but it no longer stretches across the whole width of the page. This is because fixed elements are not a part of the normal document flow. No space is allocated for a fixed element in the page layout. Because it's not a part of the layout, it doesn't do any automatic resizing to fit. Fortunately, we can still use a width of 100% to force the header to expand. So under our position fixed, we're going to add width 100%. Another problem with our navbar is that the links are displayed as a list. We can change their display types to make them look more like you would expect. Setting display to inline will cause the list items to arrange themselves in a row instead of a column. This will also get rid of the bullet points, which only appear for list display types. So under nav li, we're going to add display and set it to inline. The instruction for task number 3 tells us that we'll be setting the width of these elements in the next task. Unfortunately, you can't set the width or height for inline elements. You can only do this for block elements. We'll need to use the hybrid display type inline block, which will cause the list items to arrange in a row, but will also allow for block styles. So we can just add -block to get the style inline block. Now that our elements are set to display as inline block, we can set their widths. We'll set them to 80 pixels according to task number 4. So we'll add width and set that to 40 px for 40 pixels. The header is looking good, but its fixed positioning is causing it to overlap with the rest of the page. Like we talked about in task number 2, fixed elements are removed from the flow of the page, so everything else shifted up to fill in the space where the header used to be. We'll need to shift the page back down by the height of the header so that it doesn't overlap. To do this, we're going to set the position of main to relative. Relatively positioned elements stay in the page flow but can be displayed at a position relative to the reserved spots on the page flow. We'll come back to that in task number 7. For now, let's just set the position to relative. So under main, we'll set position, this time to relative instead of fixed. Now the header is missing. Well, actually it's just behind the main. I'll demonstrate this by shifting main down by a bit. I'm going to add top 100 pixels. Now I've moved main out of the way so that we can see the header. We'll get into how this works in the next task. Notice how main goes in front of the header when we scroll. When we don't use any position properties, elements don't typically overlap, so it's easy for the browser to display exactly what you want. When we do use position properties, it's up to us to decide which elements should be on top. We can use the z-index property for this. The default value is 0, so we just need to give header a z-index of any positive number. So we'll come back up to header and give it a z-index of 1. Now when we scroll, the header stays on top because it has a greater z-index than main. Let's take a look at the top property that I used to shift main out of the way. Main is relatively positioned. This means that we can use the properties top, right, bottom, and left to shift it in any direction. Main won't actually move, but it will be displayed relative to its actual position. On our page, main has top set to 100 pixels, which shifts it 100 pixels down from its real position in the page flow. To show how main is only displayed in the shifted position, let's change the value to 500 pixels. This gives us a big 500 pixel space at the top, and if we scroll down, we can see that it causes main to overlap the next section by 500 pixels. The next section doesn't shift down because main isn't actually moving, it's just being shown 500 pixels lower. Let's set it to 80 pixels, like this task suggests. 80 is a good value for this offset because it shows no blank space between the header and main, and it also doesn't overlap too much into the next section. Speaking of the next section, that's the part we're going to style next. Right now, design, develop, and deploy are in a column. We can set them to display horizontally in the same way that we aligned list items in the header. We'll set display to inline block. So that's display set to inline-block. Our elements are still showing up as a column. This is because they're too wide. We can set their widths to make sure that they only take up so much horizontal space. So we'll set width to 200 pixels here. On my screen, these are still not in a row, but that's just because of my window size. If we use the expand button in the top right corner of this window, we can see it in a more standard browser size. One of the advantages of inline display is that it automatically moves to a new line if the content doesn't fit in the window. This makes it easier to make responsive designs which work on any screen size. We're done with the task-by-task instructions for this project, but Codecademy has left us with a challenge at the end. Make the footer element fixed to the bottom of the page regardless of scrolling. Let's start by adding the same styles that made our header work. We're going to add position fixed, we'll add width of 100%, and we're going to add z-index of 1. So where's the footer? In the case of the header, that was the first HTML element in index.html, so nothing was affecting it. The footer is the last HTML element, so its location is affected by the elements that come before it. However, because fixed elements are taken out of the page flow, we can place footer wherever we want using top, right, bottom, and left. For example, let's give this top 0 to bring it to the top of the page. With top set to 0, the footer behaves exactly like the header. If we want it on the bottom instead of the top, it's as easy as changing top to bottom. So we'll delete the word top here and replace it with bottom. In this project, we used fixed positions to align elements to the window and relative positions to offset elements. We discussed page flow and how fixed elements are removed from it. We also used inline block to arrange non-positioned elements horizontally and z-index to pick which elements come out above when overlapping. Display and position are some of the most important CSS tools for creating complex layouts. I'm Matt for Codecademy. Happy coding!
Hi, my name is Anshum.